And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network, well, at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at coalition_radio. And, of course, the original mothership at coalitionradio.us. Joining me tonight is someone who is no stranger to our program. She was deemed a repeat offender. Wow, I think going back to Coalition 2.0, but here we are again, Coalition 3.0, addressing what is turning out to be a contentious budget/legislative season. It would appear, as always, in the halls of justice, justices in the halls, and coming up this Friday, it will probably go into Friday night, is a potential for a marathon session that will really determine no less than the ability of you as a Rhode Islander, and clearly a signal to our adjoining states and around the country, your right to arm oneself, your right to self-defense, your right to bear arms. In a time when we are experiencing, because of the pandemic, what I call the Zoomification of justice and legislation here, and civil rights and civil liberties, I should say, here in Rhode Island, where we have, under the category of never let a good crisis go to waste, the Zoomification of our legislative process is nothing less than taking citizen input and condensing it down to a 2-minute soundbite, with which, unless it's met with overwhelming rhetorical force, will result in the elimination of our civil liberties here in this state. Nothing less than that. Brenda Jacobs is here with us again. She has a variety of titles. I'll let her, she is a lobbyist on behalf of the Second Amendment for Rhode Island revolvers and firearms. She is also with a number of good government groups that engage in activities of hunting, fishing, sportsmanship, competitive shooting, really running the gamut. She's a community organizer in the very best sense, because she is effectively defending the rights of the ultimate minority in the state, and that is, of course, the individual. Brenda, welcome back. I probably garbled a couple of those organizational names. There is the sheer volume of groups that have mobilized over the last handful of years in order to support fundamental civil liberties in the state is awe-inspiring. So give us a breakdown of who you're representing tonight, and let's get right to Friday's entertainment.
Well, first and foremost, I am the secretary and the lobbyist for Rhode Island Revolver and Rifle Association. I'm the president of the Federated Rhode Island Sportsmen, president of the Ocean State Junior Rifle Association, Rhode Island State CMP director. I'm a pistol instructor, a junior rifle coach, and I am a chief range safety officer. I'm a competitor too. That's really how this all started. When I was 11, I started competing with a .22 small ball rifle, and most recently an AR-15. So I'm a little embedded in the gun community.
I would say so, but in doing so, you represent families from across the state for whom outdoor sports, competitive rifle is really an integral part of their life, an integral part of their community, and an organization that we pointed out with your appearance just about a month or so ago represents a huge and cannot be understated economic impact on the state, both with regard to funds and taxes collected, the economic value of the open space that you folks manage, the impact on the environment that you folks are able to subsidize, and again, just the safety for all of those folks who at one point or another come into contact with this whole panoply of organizations. We've often talked about how respect for firearms begins with knowledge and training. And it can be done so at a very young age. And one of the healthiest ways to promote firearms safety is, well, let's just say not only just a familiarity, but a training and an understanding of the role that firearms have in our life, both on a sporting basis and, again, as a choice for your own personal self-defense. Every year we're sort of treated to this gun day, I guess we will. And when I first became familiar with it a few years back in those olden times when on gun night, literally tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders would descend on Halitosis Hall, as we love to call it here, and make their voices heard. Every year I would continue to be impressed with new faces and new stories who pop not out of the political bubble that I spend so much time in and the political bubble that you have to work with, but ordinary Rhode Islanders from sites never seen before who were provocative, mature, accessible, and informative about their rights and responsibilities as sports people or advocating for the defense of the individual. Now, in what I've called in the run-up to the show, the Zoomification, if you will, of politics and our civil rights and our civil liberties in this state, let's start from the beginning, talk about which bills you want to talk about tonight, but also let's talk about the process and how folks are going to be able to get involved on Friday, whether it be as someone weighing in remotely, as someone who's able to testify, as someone who's able to organize and or contribute to the cause. So I'm effectively going to turn the mic over to you and just say, let's start from the beginning. What can we do?
Okay. So the first thing is, obviously, we can't be testifying in person. So what they did this year is they put the hearing on Friday afternoon at 1 p.m., which is very convenient for all the working people. They've limited us to 2 minutes per person to speak on these. And we have to sign up for testimony if we want to do verbal testimony, and we have to submit written testimony, but it has to be done by 4 o'clock on the previous day. So we created a little bit of a challenge, but what we've done is with the Rhode Island Firearm Owners League website is we've actually made a landing page where you can actually go in and sign up to do verbal testimony and written testimony right on the page. And when you do the written testimony, you can actually click on the bottom button and it will make sure your testimony got received because you'll be able to see it on the list. So as far as the bills go, they've really outdone themselves this year with creativity. They're doing a victory dance, the anti-gunners already, because they do have plenty of votes in both the House and the Senate because the progressives have done their takeover up there. And I've already their shenanigans and have wheeled and dealed their way into getting others that normally wouldn't support gun legislation on to sign on as co-signers on the bill, basically by deceiving them about the intent of the bills. So we'll start with the House Bill 5381, which requires firearm sellers requires purchasers to execute medical authorization release forms. So that in effect is all of you're essentially signing off on your records for your mental health. So the reason that we're against this one is because, for one, it discourages healthcare participation because a lot of people now are worried about going to the doctor and having some type of medication or issue that might flag them as having an issue, a mental health issue. The other problem with this bill is firearm dealers, they're not equipped to handle HIPAA paperwork. That you're supposed to, in this state, you're supposed to be actually certified to handle HIPAA paperwork. Are they going to require all the firearm dealers in this state, to become HIPAA certified? And then the other thing that's the most worrisome, and this also I am worried about in the federal bill, the HR 127, is that what is the cutoff for mental health issue? If you go to grief counseling, are you now going to always have a mark on your record as having a mental health issue? What about taking medication like a Wellbutrin? Wellbutrin, as you know, a lot of people use to quit smoking, but that's also considered a mental health drug. So, if you have bulimia, I mean, you can't own a firearm because that's considered a mental health issue. Like, where is the balance? Where does this end? So that's a really dangerous law. And also remember, as I always say, even if you don't own a firearm, these bills are dangerous because they'll set a precedence, and they'll start at the guns, but what are they going to do next? What are they next going to ask you to submit these authorizations to release all of your records? And by the way, the Attorney General right now on his CCW application, you have to release your tax records as well. Juvenile records, tax records, public utility records, medical health records. And that's again, that's open-ended with no closure.
Let me jump in for a second. About 2 years or so ago, if my memory serves me correctly, there was a move and it was initiated by Peter Kilmartin, who at that point in time was the Attorney General, former Pawtucket police person, and he wanted to take the prescription medical database in the state, which confoundingly had been allowed to be created. And again, as always, when they start this legislation, to your point, it's for study purposes only, and we will make sure that the information within will be handled discreetly and with a great deal of respect for privacy. Now, this is at a time when the American people finally have gotten to the point, our culture, where folks who are suffering from depression or any one of a number of mental health challenges, I won't even call them illnesses per se, but challenges, because you're right, there's a wide range of the degree of suffering by these folks. But fortunately, as a culture, we had decided that we were adults now. We were going to handle it like adults. And we were going to make sure that there was no shame attached with people coming forward and addressing their challenges and being happier for it, not having to worry about the arm of government or private individuals having access to what they taken care of, so that they didn't have to, make some public, unless they chose to. If they chose to, that was fine. So that's the first step, and we know the rest of the story. About a couple of years later, Mr. Kilmartin, with the backing of the legislature, in the middle of the night, and the sort of cheap theatrics for which he was famous or infamous, as possibly the worst attorney general in the history of man, decided that police would no longer need a warrant to get to this information. And the very people, because I fought alongside him, I'm a civil libertarian, the very people who are sponsoring this were the ones who were horrified, outraged that folks would have access to folks' mental health records. Because they realize, as they should realize right now, is that folks won't disclose it because of shame, sadly, or fear of disclosure or embarrassment, which they shouldn't. We all agree they shouldn't, but we're still human beings. And as a result, people would be afraid. They'd have to make the choice between giving up a fundamental right, a fundamental human right, not just a fundamental natural right, not just an American right. It's what I call post-constitutional. You have the right to bear arms to defend yourself. That's it. There's no question to it. There's no qualification to it. So now we have the situation where, in order to not lose their right to bear arms, there will be people, veterans amongst them, who will not acknowledge or will try to soft pedal or try to step away for a time being from very important mental health self-care or professional care. So what they have done effectively here, and particularly in the case of veterans who are suffering a great deal, we all know what's happening to veterans in our society, and that's the real shame, by the way. But what they have done is put their public policy agenda in front of the needs of ordinary Rhode Islanders for whom mental health care is a critical component to to the success of their day-to-day lives, and they should be ashamed of it because they knew better 2 or 3 years ago, and God damn it, if they're going to do it now, it is in spite of their own knowledge of the potential harm that they could be causing to their brothers or sisters or neighbors or coaches or teachers or priests, and as or more importantly, folks who served, men and women who served honorably on behalf of this nation. It's just disgusting to me. I'm sorry. I had to jump in there. It's just absolutely disgusting.
I feel the same way. And this is what's very dangerous about the federal bill, the HR 127, because a lot of this language mirrors that language in that bill also. So now we can move on to, let's see, because we have 10 bad bills. We were able to submit quite a few good bills, which was pretty good. This one is, we'll go to, the locking in the houses. So the reason that, that they want all of the guns locked inside a safe, we're against that one because it kind of defeats the purpose of self-defense. In the middle of the night, if you're awoken by something, do you really think that you're going to be able to open a safe and then get to your firearms, which are now locked in a safe? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Lord.
And there again, we're empowering the criminals and punishing the law-abiding citizens. So now let's go to the mag ban. This one is another one that I'm personally aggravated with the deception of this bill. So with the mag ban, which you all think is a magazine ban, but by the very misleading definitions in this bill, it says dropping floor plate, anything that has a dropping floor plate. Well, anything that has a dropping floor plate is any semi-automatic firearm or anything that has a magazine, any firearm. So you're essentially making those illegal. And the other thing is, why 10? You know what their answer is? Because Massachusetts and Connecticut do that. That's scientific. So, and again, it affects personal property without justification. And as a woman pistol instructor, I also find that this is a detriment to ladies, especially ladies that are just learning how to shoot, because a lot of times the aftermarket magazines don't work as well. Let's face it, the manufacturers are manufacturing a firearm. They're manufacturing the components that work with that firearm. And now you need to alter that firearm for this law. And that essentially makes that firearm not work as good. And I know that because I've used aftermarket magazines. So that's another feel-good bill in it. Mm-hmm. And then also you have 2 people breaking in your house. So now you're at a disadvantage because they'll have more firepower than you will. It's just crazy.
I would feel better if, in fact, there was any sort of discovery process or public testimony, if you will, outside of a legislative chamber when it comes to the discussion surrounding these bills, because there is so much information being peddled. The first and most important of is that we live in a very dangerous state where gun crime is rampant. And you and I know that to be patently false. All right, that would be the first thing. So I guess, a couple of years ago, on an issue that I always talk about because I was involved in it, whatever, was the stadium issues, and to the eternal credit of the Senate Finance Committee, they commenced a statewide tour of folks and held hearings with the dreaded public, the great unwashed. Those, what was the line from a couple years ago? People clinging to their guns and religion. But it had 2 impacts. Number one, it showed firsthand just how many people were opposed to it. The stadium subsidy. And 2, it had the opportunity where people could clear the air. They were given an opportunity to express their concerns and provide analysis, and often it was folks, once again, outside the bubble who were able to be pretty provocative. Here we have not just a stadium. We are talking about the subrogation, the abrogation the elimination of again, I want to express this in as blunt terms as possible. Not just a constitutional right in the state of Rhode Island, not just a constitutional right, but a right that is so fundamental to the human condition that self-defense, as I like to say when you and I get together, is so important that one in the act of self-defense can commit and be justified perhaps the most heinous act in our culture, which is, of course, taking the life of another individual. But it is considered appropriate when it is truly, not imaginary. We have courts to adjudicate this, right? Adjudicate, I say. We have courts to analyze this. We have a lot of ways that we can discuss whether or not an act of violence was in self-defense or another. But ultimately, that right, that act of self-defense is fully permitted, and it absolves one from the ramifications of taking another life. And yet we will take, in this case, 10 bills, cram it into an afternoon in the midst of a pandemic where clearly anyone who's tried to testify over the last few weeks, including myself, knows that you sit and wait for a call that may or may not come. A process so convoluted that, quite frankly, the folks who can barely control government at a time when we are living a quote-unquote normal life can barely take care of their business. And we're going to consolidate that all into one day. It is disgusting. But please, continue.
It is disgusting. I'm not gonna argue with you. Let's move on to our assault weapons ban.
Oh, assault weapons.
So another one that had pet peeve about is another misleading terminology, because they're always like, oh, we're not taking away your Second Amendment rights. Oh, we're not taking away all guns. We're just eliminating the assault weapons. Well, then you read the definitions or their definition of assault weapon, and it lists anything that can hold a bayonet. Because those antique firearms, from the 1800s, they're really dangerous. Then they list anything with a threaded barrel. So most people do not understand the concept or what that means. Well, I can tell you that my son's Olympic rifle that cost about $7,000, that is a single action 22, is now going to be illegal under the assault weapons ban because it has a threaded barrel. Most of your shotguns have threaded barrels because that's how you put the choke on. So just about every single firearm is assembled using a threaded barrel. So by putting that terminology in there, it essentially encompasses all firearms. Really, the only thing it really might not touch would be some revolvers. But other than that, it's most every firearm. And any ones that they might have missed, they pick it up by, again, the dropping floor plate, which means anything with a magazine. So that there goes all your pistols. So it's a blatant lie to say this is just a few rifles or just a few firearms. This is a blatant lie. And it's perpetrated by these anti-gunners. And they know what they're doing. And that's infuriating to me that they've misled a lot of the legislators up there that don't understand the mechanical workings of firearms. So that's my little 2 cents on that one.
Why why don't they have an understanding of, if you're going to legislate something, if you're going to rule on something, shouldn't you have a working knowledge of what this terminology means?
You would think so.
I mean, call me crazy, but if this were a conversation about, a woman's choice, if this was a conversation about abortion, if this was a conversation about tax rates, if this was a conversation about public housing, if this was a conversation about beach fees, if this was a conversation about cannabis, if this was a conversation about minimum sentencing, if this was a conversation about literally anything at all that could be considered appropriate to be governed under the public domain, you can sure as hell understand that they would have a working knowledge of the terminology and expect to be held in public, display if they evidence such a clear misunderstanding of something that they're willing to legislate on.
You would think.
And this is year after year after year. Well, we've invited them.
Mm-hmm. And we've invited them to the range. We've invited them to, I'm all for educating them and letting them be more knowledgeable just so they can understand what they're talking about. But you're right, they are legislating on stuff that they don't understand, and they don't understand the impact. And because they're so drowned out by the agenda, they're not willing to even listen to the long-term effects and ramifications it's going to have for the state economically, environmentally. We're such a huge contributor to the state environmentally and economically. They don't even want to consider that. And right. How about, why are we the fourth safest state in the United States? Do you think it's because we're unarmed? Because it's been proven in different parts of the United States and other countries that once you start disarming people, crime goes up. Because if you're taking away our guns, then you're taking away, I can rob this house because I know they don't have guns. Oh, we can rob this car. We can, it's just like, what are you thinking? If you hate guns that much, please put a sign up on your yard that says, I do not have guns, or a way to protect myself in my home. Let's just throw it out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Gun-free zones. They've always worked so well.
Yeah, go ahead and make your house a gun-free zone. We're good with that.
We've made gun-free zones on active military bases, and we've had young American men and women assassinated as a result.
Yep, absolutely. So that's a nice segue into the school gun-free zone bill. Mm-hmm. This one is unbelievable because it's a felony to drive onto the school property with a firearm, but they want you to unload the firearm in your car or the sidewalk or the parking lot, leave the gun in the car unloaded before you go into the school. What could possibly go wrong? We don't even do that when we're going to the range. You don't unload a firearm in a parking lot or in your car in a confined space or on the side street. Think of all the ways that this could go really wrong really fast, because that is just amplifying accidental shootings. Or are the poor police going to get called every time they see someone unloading their firearm on the side of the road because they got to go in and get their kid out of school? It's just... And it goes against what we're supposed to be doing as concealed carry holders. As a concealed carry holders, it's concealed. It's not supposed to be brandished. It's not supposed to be shown. It's concealed. So this goes against every single thing of safety that we're taught for years and years and years. And it just blows my mind.
Let's talk about, if you will, and here's an opportunity for us to be mythbusters for folks who are not in the firearms community who might listen to this either tonight or in the near future. The process in order to be able to carry a concealed carry weapon, a CCW. Talk to me about the process involved, because from what I understand, there is, and I'm not trying to make light, but my sort of gallows humor leads me to say you're pretty much looking at a DNA analysis of an individual in the state of Rhode Island to have a concealed carry permit. Talk to me about the process.
Okay, so I can only talk about my process in my town because every town is a little bit different. In my town, I have to ask for a application from the police chief. Then I have to get my fingerprints done. I have to get a photo done. I have to submit 2 character references. I have to show proficiency. In my town, my chief, he likes to make sure that you know how to operate your firearm safely, like if you've taken any safety courses. Then he does all your background checks. They call your neighbors, they call your references. Then we sit down with him for, I think he spent about 45 minutes to an hour with me, and we thoroughly go through my application. We have to list why we want to carry. We have to list all of your pertinent information. And we sit and we have an actual meeting about all the, the safety aspects, what to do if, you ever are in a situation where you have to use your firearm in a situation, how to react when the police get there, how to react when, if you get pulled over for a speeding ticket, what you're required to do as far as, if you get a speeding ticket, how you behave when the police officer comes to your car. You can't be a marijuana medical card holder. So it's pretty extensive. And I'm in a smaller town where everybody knows everybody. I mean, I babysat the kid that did my background check. So but he still did it, and he still called all my neighbors, and, so it's not simple. It's very thorough, and people need to understand that they don't give them out to just anybody.
Are you aware of a single firearms event, if you will, in Rhode Island, well, as far back as you can tell, by someone who had a CCW?
That was a criminal act? No.
Yeah.
No, in fact, national studies show that concealed carry holders are actually safer than police officers. Right. And I'm not discrediting the police, because I have a utmost respect for the police, but they've been hung up in more situations off duty than regular concealed carry holders.
Right. Marjorie Stoneman, the high school in Florida that suffered those horrific murders. The police response to that, I'll just approach this generically. It's a sensitive subject. The police response to that was, one could argue, inadequate, wasn't it?
Yes. Very.
There's a theory about the good guy being at the scene of a crime. And we saw that recently at a church shooting, which was horrifyingly graphic, recorded on video. And what you see is the bad guy, and they had their own security force, their own trained security force. And what you saw there was the quote-unquote bad guy shoot someone, and with almost clinical detached skill, a member of the security force of the chief of that church take that person out.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw, as a result, a significant saving of lives. From your personal experience, as someone who I would argue to say has got the most, I'll put it this way, it would be difficult for me to figure out anyone in Rhode Island who has more hands-on experience with weapons, more hands-on experience with training people on weapons, more hands-on training, more of a variety of people with weapons, who is intimate literally with these type of weapons at virtually every level. I would be hard-pressed to find someone in the state of Rhode Island who has more experience than you do. I just can't imagine it. From your experience, does the potential to have the good guy, as they say, at a school, potentially a huge benefit for the safety of the individuals at that school?
Yes, I firmly believe that, and I believe it on two levels. For one, if it's not a gun-free zone, that school is less likely to be targeted, and that's also an independent study by crime.org has been done on that, and 92% of all mass shootings in schools were done in gun-free zones. So you put that little element of, there might be someone there that's going to resist me, because let's face it, every mass shooting ends when a good guy shows up with a gun. And if it was my kids in that school, which my kids are older, but I do have nieces and nephews, and I would pray that if there was someone showed up at their school with, to do harm, I would pray that there was a concealed carry holder there to mitigate the situation.
Because again, and we're speaking in a broad brush here, is it fair to say that your typical concealed carry holder is amongst the most highly trained users of weapons, both with extreme experience levels possible? Is that a fair statement?
To be honest, I like to see proficiency, and when I spend time with people, I want to make sure that they're comfortable with their firearm, and it takes time, and people have to commit the time to do that. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of there's a lot of resources out there that get people to be able to get trained better and be more familiar. That's my personal preference when I'm spending time with people. I want them to be comfortable and familiar. And I hope that every trainer out there does the same thing. But I would say, yes, they are comfortable enough with their firearms to be able to assist in a situation. And let's face it, that's not for everybody either. Some people might freeze. Some people, won't engage. And that's okay, because really the last thing that you want to do is ever have to use your firearm. But, that's, people think that we're gun crazy and blah, 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 but that's brandishing, and we're not supposed to brandish. And the last thing we ever want to do is have to hurt another human being.
And yet there's more legislation, isn't there?
Yes.
Let's keep going.
Okay. Let's see. What else do we got?
By the way, all of this is going to be...
now it's just all stupid.
Right. But I want to set the right framework here. All of this is going to be discussed in one day.
Yes. We have 10 anti-bills, and then we have like 9 good bills. Because let's talk about, for the good bills for a minute, we're working on reciprocity. Mm-hmm. And that's a good bill. We're talking about reciprocity with Connecticut and Massachusetts, which will help the people that live in like Bristol, Warren, because they have to cut through Massachusetts sometimes, and down in Westerly where they have to drive into Connecticut, to get from one part of town to another. So, reciprocity would be a good bill for that. And reciprocity so that other states can recognize Rhode Island permits, because, other states, it's just back-asswards right now.
Right.
So there are like 4 different reciprocity bills. I think one of the most important pro bills would be to the Attorney General to please give us a usable crime report. Every year we come up here to the State House, and we have to pay for public records requests and go through all of that public records requests to just try and get bits and pieces of information that would be so beneficial to be using during this legislation. Why are we doing all of this when we've had 63 gun crimes? Why are we doing this when some towns have 0 gun crimes? So if we had a usable report that actually broke down what the charge was it a firearm that was stolen from a home? Was it a firearm that was brought in from another state? Was it a straw purchase? Well, then we would know where the issue is, and then we could address it accordingly, rather than doing this giant sweep on law-abiding citizens. And we're getting hung up for crimes we never intend to commit. It's just, I wish that he would really give us a usable report, because the data is really good once you start getting it. And it's really, every year I see our crime rate go down and our gun violations go down. And I'm like, why are we doing this when we're the 4th safest state in the country? It's just it's such a waste of time. And it's an agenda. And it's just, like I said, systemic disarmament. That's what they're working on.
ultimately, what's the point? Where do we end in terms of where do we? What's the end game in all of this? I mean, you keep rolling back. It's my contention that a number of the groups involved are, there's considerable funding for them. I mean, what?
I think it's full out disarmament. I really feel like they want to just do away with the Second Amendment and disarm everybody. I feel like, as our government gets more progressive, they feel like we're not capable of making decisions for ourselves. And I also don't feel like they have good intentions for us.
Right.
Quite frankly.
Right. Because ultimately, the central question still should be why, despite all these laws, despite all this legislation, despite all of this drama, despite all of the angst, the sturm und drang, despite all of the headlines, the endless amount of money spent by anti-gun efforts, despite all of this, why have they been unable to stem the flow of weapons to people who simply don't care about the law? Everything they've done, despite the fact that this is a safer state, by and large, by their own admission, has been a failure because they can't get folks who break the laws routinely to stop breaking the laws.
Well, that goes back to our judicial system, unfortunately. What happens is they let these criminals out, and they're repeat offenders. Most crimes, when we look them up and we do the public records request, they're repeat offenders. Like the sting that happened in Providence, I think it was 2 years ago, where they got the 26 people that on all the gun charges. Well, we took their names because they listed their names and ages in the paper, and we did a court search on them. Some of them, 7 of them, had been released 3 days prior on gun charges. Why? Why is that happening? And when you talk to the police officers, their biggest challenge is that they arrest someone and then 3 days later they're back on the street again, and they're repeat offenders, and that's a huge problem. And domestic violence. Let's talk about that for a minute. They give them restraining orders. The violations on people walking through restraining orders is unbelievable. Mm-hmm. So why are we? You're right. Why do we keep doing with this when, to me, the government's not doing their job? We're being law-abiding citizens. If there's a bad guy, you're supposed to prosecute him, and you're supposed to put him in jail or do whatever you're going to do. And here, we're the ones that keep getting punished for crimes we never have no intention of committing. And it is frustrating.
Right.
And it's a discrimination thing too. We'll touch base a little bit on, what's happening with Justine Caldwell today in Projo, mm-hmm. Claiming that, that we're picking on her and we're saying mean things.
Yeah,
because we've been.
I was going to say, has there been any proof yet? I mean, these are serious allegations. If you're threatening a lawmaker, I think we all agree that it's critical in a society, as much as many of us may not be fond of government. It's critical in a society to maintain the respect for the physical safety. Well, everyone, but in particular, people who extend themselves, regardless of how we feel about their politics, to be lawmakers. I'm not aware of anybody in any of the movements that we've talked about who would seriously even think about, and remember, this is someone who put this to paper, so not only did they think about it, they decided to write it down and then send it.
Right.
That is fundamentally, wow. That stands fundamentally opposite to everything that you and I and everyone who believes in individual respect would ever do. So
you would think she would have called the police.
And quite frankly, if someone had issued a death threat or a physical threat to a lawmaker, I'm with you 100%. Even if their politics are
Yep,
completely
they should
different
be
than
held.
mine.
Oh yeah, they should be held accountable. There's no doubt about it. So the funny story about this is that incident happened 3 weeks ago because she was talking to her colleagues at the State House about that incident 3 weeks ago. Ironic that it shows up on Gun Week, right?
Right.
And not only that, not to discredit the, this, it really should not have happened at all, but this is also what happened to her when she put her abortion bill in. And this is also what happened to her when the gun bills were put in 2 years ago. It's a pattern of behavior for her at this point.
Right.
So it makes, it's just pandering to her agenda.
Right.
And she really needs to think about how she treats her constituents. She isn't respectful enough to even consider us a constituent. We're a yellow shirt or a gunner, or, she has all these little terms for us. It's like, no, we're a constituent.
Right.
And she should respect us as constituents, whether she agrees with us or not. She's up there to represent us. And right now she is not representing a good portion of her constituents. Or I would even go so far as to say a majority of them, because we did a petition and a lot of people in East Greenwich and West Greenwich signed that petition. So, she's just, but it does, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because we have, David Cicilline saying we're white supremacists because we're gun owners. So,
Right.
I mean, it's just, you want to not be that frustrated, but you're coming off a year of being locked down from COVID. Now you have all these bills comes out that are going to infringe on your rights and take your personal property and everything else, get your health care. I mean, just total intrusion of your privacy. And you can't go up there and rally. You can't go up there and testify. So people are just at their wits' end. And now you get a disrespectful representative that can't even give you the time of day because her ideas don't match with yours. It's the perfect storm. And, it's sad. That in my community, we try and keep everybody respectful and courteous and polite. But how do you keep doing that when you're not getting the same respect from the people that are supposed to be representing you?
Right. No, again, there's, it really does come down to a question of respect, because ultimately all lawmakers represent their communities. They don't represent the left wing of their communities. They don't represent the right wing of their communities. They certainly don't represent one ethnic, religious, or other group. They just simply don't. Our governor, unfortunately, our new governor, is a self-styled moderate Democrat. His comment to me in writing: the lieutenant governor has long been on the record in support of banning the sale of military-style weapons, limiting the number of rounds a magazine can hold, and preventing civilians from carrying a concealed weapon on school grounds. These are not new policy standards. Are there any military-style weapons involved here? What is a military-style weapon, by the way?
Well, a military-style weapon is generally a fully automatic weapon, which are already banned. And if you can get one, it would be by permit only, and that's almost impossible to get. So, again, people don't understand, like the AR. Oh, it looks scary. Oh, well, you know what? Most of the scary looking features on that are actually safety features. I know because I shoot one. So they just don't understand. They don't understand what they're talking about. So they just say, "Oh, it looks scary." My son's Olympic rifle. It looks scary. It looks like a space gun, but it's a 22 single action, bolt action rifle. But they're judging stuff on looks. They're not asking about the safety features. They're not asking about the functionality. They're not asking any of that, and they shouldn't be making these laws if they don't understand what they're talking about. And not only that, they can't even tell you what the crime statistics are. When you ask these people if they've ever read the State Police Uniform Crime Report, nope, haven't seen it. Well, why don't you look at that and see what the actual crime rate is? Did you know we have a gun court in this state? Did you know that, Pat, that we have a gun court?
No, I actually knew that. Yeah, but it's
okay. Well, most people don't know we have a gun court.
Right.
And when you start looking at gun court statistics and how many cases are actually go through the gun court, and then 40% of the gun cases are disposed before they even hit the court. And then, 2% of them do more than 10 years in prison. 2%.
Meanwhile,
but,
anti-gun advocates like Jason Knight have built a career out of defending the very people that he would purport to save us from. That's another conversation.
He couldn't. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Jason Knight, because Jason Knight helped Justine write the bills, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jason Knight's website is back up, and the testimonials are back up, by the way. The mm-hmm. ones that brag about him getting people the gun charges dropped, brag about getting the domestic violence charges dropped. So here you have a person that is actually on judiciary, actually writing bills, and actually helping these criminals get off of these charges and making money at it. I feel like that's a direct conflict of interest.
Yeah, then that's interesting. I mean, I would argue that on one hand, every defendant in our criminal justice system deserves the very best representation that they can get, allegedly, regardless of whether they can afford or not. But at the same token, if one is, if I had a tax accounting business, I don't think I should be able to write tax law. If I have a construction business, I probably shouldn't be involved in either zoning laws or construction safety legislation. And in the same method, I'm not quite sure how Mr. Knight gets away with the notion that he can essentially, write the legislation that he is then highly compensated, God bless him, to foil. It seems like a clear conflict of interest to me. But I want to close the night out, if you will, on a political question. You can choose to answer this or not. That's seriously. You and I talk hard facts. We don't really dive into the political as much in terms of elections. So I know that you're a lobbyist for the organization. If you don't feel comfortable discussing this, that's fine. But Lieutenant Governor McKee became lieutenant governor largely on the backs of a number of citizens groups, one of which was the support of the Second Amendment community.
Yes.
Governor McKee seems to be gearing himself to what is going to be a contentious primary, in which it is clear that he will oppose a progressive candidate or candidates. There's just no doubt about that. And it is also clear that Governor McKee would dearly like to have another 2 terms as governor. It's something, and I'm not faulting for that, but it's something he has clearly shaped his career towards as the culmination of his government service. Given Mr. McKee's recent, on the coalition radio, by the way, I'm just going to give myself a little teeny bit of a pat on the back because I forced the issue. Given his now public positions on the Second Amendment and his unwillingness really to counter them at all, will Governor McKee enjoy the support of the Second Amendment community in what is clearly going to be a contentious election season in just about a year and a half or so away?
He's going to have to meet with us because we have requested meetings with him, and the transition team was like, well, he's transitioning. He doesn't have time. I've called him, I've emailed him. I've not heard back, but he really is going to have to come to the table and talk with us so that we can help him to understand what's going on. Because even if he's not a gun person, I feel like the economic side of this issue would help him to understand the value that we have. Mm-hmm. And I feel, again, that the anti-gun movement is up there in his ear, lying to him every day. Their website is full of lies. Their lobbyists are full of lies. Like, there is nothing that is honest and transparent about anything they're doing, especially their money circle. Their money circle is insane. They always say that NRA funds us, but last year, NRA gave their lobbyists $5,973. They took in $1.3 million. So there's not even a close comparison there. So, you know, I feel like, I feel almost bad that he's being betrayed by them.
Right.
And I hope that he gives us the opportunity to come to the table and let us at least talk to him about our side.
Right.
But until then, we've actually changed our tune. We're not endorsing anybody unless they are, you know, A++, because too many times in Rhode Island, we've been, you know, Senate president, for example. We've always helped him. We've always supported him. And now he's turning on us. So, you know, like that's just a whole nother story. But, you know, the wheels, you know how the deals go in Rhode Island, all the backroom deals. Well,
yep.
We're going to be cautious about endorsements.
Right. Well, there's an old Rhode Island saying that I love to invoke, and these are probably good words to send a signal to elected officials. The late great Vincent A. Buddy Cianci used to say, "Don't step on the foot today that's connected to the ass you'll have to kiss tomorrow."
Right.
There are a lot of Rhode Islanders who have gold shirts in their drawers that they're washing and getting ready right tonight, aren't they? And while they might not be able to stand on the steps, although personally, see, that's why you're the adult in this conversation. I'm not. It's going to come.
I know what you're going to say about the rallies, but here's my problem. It's not off the table. Not off the table, but we got to do it in such a way that they're not going to use it against us. I do not want to bring people up there and have them called insurrectionists. You know, I just worry about
the optics.
You know, I just worry about the people. You know, I love my firearm community, and I do not want anybody getting hung up because you have some jerk come up there and ruin it for the rest of us, or, you know, false accusations. And, you know, they need that type of drama to push their agenda. And that's a fine line for us to have to walk, to make sure that we're being heard, but not being used as a tool against us.
You folks have done a wonderful job. And by the way, congratulations today on your efforts across Rhode Island media. You continue to present a responsible, mature, professional outlook that is fact-based, that is articulate, and accessible. Let's close out. How can folks weigh in, understanding that, as we like to say here in the coalition, that folks in the Second Amendment community, and it spans an unimaginable array of Rhode Islanders. It is a true mosaic. But how can they, given the fact that they will not be able to vote themselves on this legislation, given the fact that so many of these representatives are just simply, once elected, impervious to any real contact or connection with their communities, how can folks weigh in? Which website should they go to? And what can they do before Friday?
Okay, to testify verbally or written, you need to go to the rifol.org website. And there's a landing page there where you can access all the information that you need to testify and to sign up. But that doesn't end there, because what we're hearing from legislators is that they need to know from their constituents where people stand. So you need to email them, you need to call them. Very important, because the other side is robocalling them, so that you have to call them and say, I am your constituent. My name is, I live at, and then you have to say, I want to know how you're going to vote on this upcoming legislation. You don't have to write a novel. You don't have to, be super articulate. You just have to call them, tell them that you oppose it, give them your actual information so they know what their constituent base is thinking. And believe me, I've seen some of the texts that have gone out by the other side, and they're from all over the place, all over other states. That's why I can't emphasize enough that it's important that your legislators know you're a constituent.
Excellent.
And don't let up. If you're not getting an answer from them, go to their door. Like really, don't let up. You have to get them to tell you what they're thinking and how they're going to vote, and let them know how you feel, because it's the only way right now you're going to get heard.
And folks in Cumberland, Alex Marzalkowski is the state rep for North Cumberland. He sold us out on the stadium. He's a big part of the former regime. You don't get to be assistant to the director of the associate council on the finance committee like he is, unless you pretty much sell part of your soul to the devil. But let's let folks know that they're reaching out to Mr. Marzalkowski and give him a high and a happy. And by the way, the phone calls should always be polite. They should always be respectful. As frustrated as people are, there's a lot of anger there in the streets right now because of the way business has been shut down, the government really taking advantage of the pandemic and limiting constituent contact on issues. The fact that there was literally no shared sacrifice between government and what's happened to individual businesses around the state. There's a lot of anger and frustration there, but folks, you got to suck it up. I'm an emotional older Irish guy. Believe me, I do bitter really well. It's just, you have to just take a deep breath. Make sure, one little trick when you're calling on the phone is to have a mirror in front of you and smile at that mirror. As twisted as that smile may be, smile at the mirror, so this way you sound pleasant, but you're still making the point that we will remember, we're taking names, and expect that things are going to change this time around if, in fact, folks in Rhode Island get sold out. But those are my words, not my guess. Brenda, as always, I want to thank you for coming on. I know you're working to get a couple of folks on the air. This broadcast will be shared tomorrow and in the coming days. And again, there are so many people chipping in at so many different levels within the independent media, with the mainstream media. There's a lot of resources available, folks. You're not alone. Join up one of these great organizations. Get in touch with Brenda, Glenn Valentine, Carlos Souza. There's great people in this state who believe in the safe, if you will, respectful use of firearms, who are part of our sporting community, part of our tourist community, who by federal dollars bring in tens of millions of dollars in support for our waterways and our the special, if you will, the lands that are available for hunting, the lands that are available just for sportsmanship in general. All of this is part of the community, otherwise known as the sportsman and 2A community. It's part of the life here in Rhode Island. Let's not lose it over disinformation, outright lies, and a complete disrespect for the civil liberties of all Rhode Islanders. So, Brenda, again, thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks for being a constant source of clear, accessible information for folks who are supporters of the right to bear arms.
Well, thank you for having me. It's good to be able to have my voice heard, and I know it helps our community to know that we are getting heard out there. So I really appreciate you having me on.
All right, buddy. Brenda Jacobs, she is, well, if there is truly an alphabet soup of sporting and guns rights and safe gun access, and of groups that range from high school students to seasoned citizens to hunters to fishers to hikers, well, all of them she's involved in. This Friday, we're going to see 10 or so pieces of legislation introduced in one shot, an attempt to grab your civil rights. Let's get behind Brenda. Let's get behind this panoply of organizations that are here to protect all of us. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Please like us, follow us, share us. That's all independent media can ever ask from any of you as we try to rise above the white noise of the internet, the madness, the disinformation, the fake news, all of it. So we try and rise above that and provide perspectives on serious issues that Rhode Islanders and Americans at large face. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. RAMP, Real Access Motivates Progress, with Tina Peterson. We'll continue to deliver her series of just a breathtaking assortment of information geared towards folks who face serious physical challenges, but also a spiritual insight into some of the products and lifestyle improvements that can be had to just make life just more of an adventure for folks who face those challenges. We'll see you tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, Coalition Radio Network.